What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Dude Hines Show. Today is May 28th, 2021. In this video, I am live on YouTube, like most videos I do, and I'm joined by special guest Jared Barnes. How you doing today, Jared?
Hey, I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. We have lots of stuff to talk about. Glad you can be on the show today. I know you're a big Steelers fan. There's some big moves on the Steelers offensive line. There's some NBA playoffs talk, and that's kind of how we're going to start today's episode, talking about the NBA playoffs. And yesterday's game was very interesting. With the Bucks and the Hawks. I watched bits and pieces of the game, and to start off the game, the Bucks were in serious trouble. I mean, Antetokounmpo had 2 fouls in the first 5 minutes. They're down 15 points. I turn it back later. They ended up winning the game. Chris Middleton outscored the Hawks in the fourth quarter. To me, that was really something in this series and the whole, playoffs in general for the Milwaukee. Chris Middleton's inconsistency was a big part, a big concern for me with Milwaukee. If he can play consistent, I think Milwaukee has a chance to beat either Phoenix or the Clippers in the finals. But, if he plays inconsistent, it's really difficult to beat, a team like the Hawks. So it's definitely going to be difficult to beat a team maybe like Phoenix. But I was very impressed with the Bucks beating Atlanta. The Bucks are a much better team than Atlanta, but I was very impressed despite the early foul trouble, and they were still able to, a double-digit deficit early on in the game to actually win by double digits.
Yeah, I thought that game last night, it's been interesting. The playoffs this year, they've been fun, but then again, they've kind of stunk. A lot of people have said this is a very Mickey Mouse run that both the Suns and the Bucks are about to go on to get to the finals. When you think about Atlanta, if you shut down Trae Young like last night, came up hobbled with an ankle injury, you quickly saw the effect that had on the Hawks, like just the team in general, because he is such a key piece to that offense. He is that offense. He is the glue that holds it all together. That is not a team that honestly should be in the position they're in. The fact that they are, I love that the Hawks are in the Eastern Conference Finals. Without Trae Young, they wouldn't even be in the playoffs. And if Trae Young's not 100% healthy, they don't stand a chance against the Bucks. Now, the Bucks are a very good team, very solid team. I love Giannis. I love Chris Middleton. I love PJ Tucker. But if it takes Trae Young to be injured for the Bucks to win the game and play the way they've been playing, that's a shame. I've very much enjoyed the playoffs, but I think that it has been a little disappointing for me, just mainly because there's been so many injuries. The star players we want to watch haven't really been in the games to begin with. I very much enjoyed it, but it's been an interesting year for the NBA, strictly with all the injuries and stuff like that.
It's very interesting because I saw something about a week or so ago. At that time, the NBA playoffs ratings compared to last season's playoffs, this season, the ratings actually have increased by around 30%. That absolutely shocked me, considering, we don't have LeBron or Curry, Durant, Kyrie, some of those guys, in the playoffs right now. But it does kind of make it more interesting because, it's a toss-up. You have no idea who's going to win. And the injuries make it much more interesting on which team could maybe, end up winning the finals. I don't think anybody expected the Hawks to be in the Eastern Conference Finals to begin the season, 3 months into the season, or even a month ago. It's just absolutely crazy. And kind of talking about, we were talking about the Eastern Conference, but the Western Conference, Phoenix is up 3-1. And, Paul George, he's been really inconsistent as well. But something that really aggravates me, Paul George could have a great game and the Clippers can win. Oh, well, the Clippers won. They don't talk about Paul George. When Paul George doesn't have a great game, everybody's, talking about on Twitter, how much he sucks.
Pandemic P.
Exactly. And to me, that's just really aggravating. But at the same time, with Lillard, being out, Lillard is far better than Paul George. It's very difficult for the Clippers to try to beat Phoenix. Phoenix has Booker, CP3, Aiden, who's playing absolutely fantastic the past month or so. It's regardless if Paul George was playing like LeBron several years ago when he took the Cavs to the finals against the Warriors when they eventually got swept. I still don't think the Clippers will probably end up winning the series. They've played a lot better than people think, though, because lots of these games have been just by one possession. If Lillard was playing for the Clippers right now, to me, I think this would be a completely different series. And honestly, I think you kind of say the same thing for when Anthony Davis was out. With the Los Angeles Lakers, there's two different LA teams. Phoenix has got very, very lucky beating them. Because both those LA teams have been very, very injury prone in the postseason.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people, especially that I talked to, make comments on just how weird the finals run has been for the Suns. I mean, you look at how when they played the Lakers, they didn't have a healthy AD that they were playing against. LeBron was like 60%, and then the next game they play the next series they played the Nuggets. The Nuggets don't have Jamal Murray, who tore his ACL earlier in the year. They don't have Mike Conley. The only person they had was Jokic, really, and Jokic could not beat the Suns either. And then they get to the finals, and then they get to the Western Conference Finals, and the Clippers are without Kawhi. I mean, Kawhi is that team. Kawhi is also they literally call him the cyborg because he's he's on a different level than a lot of other players in the NBA. He's a top 5 player. No doubt in my mind, and he's top 5 because he is just so he can carry a team to a championship. Now, Paul George has gained a lot of respect, I think, back from a lot of people after his poor because he had a very poor showing last year in the bubble. There's no doubt in my mind. I think a lot of people that trash some of those players that had a poor performance in the bubble need to maybe take a step back and rethink some things, because I don't think a lot of people could have performed at a high level in that bubble, especially if you weren't in a great place mentally coming into that thing, because being trapped and locked in, you would feel like you're slightly in prison and you're just playing basketball all the time. And I think that gets to somebody. And I think last year it got to Paul George, and he even discussed it some points at last year. And he's come back and played very well in this series. He's played very well over the last, couple weeks. He's had a couple iffy spots here and there. I like PG. I do find it hilarious that every time he misses a shot, though, he will start trending on Twitter, because that's just how much people, that just tells you how much people still think of PG, because he's clearly got everybody's name in his mouth. He's living rent free in a lot of people's heads, though.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of like he's very inconsistent when it comes to, big games. And to me, somebody who's very inconsistent when it comes to big games is James Harden. If there's a game, he does not do anything. I mean, you're expecting maybe a 40-point game. He'll get you 20 points, and it'll be 2 of 12 from the three-pointers. And people don't talk about Harden like they do Paul George. Paul George, he's kind of earned that reputation in the fact he's just very inconsistent in huge games. And I'm very interested to see if Leonard can come back. I don't doubt he will. But, it's looking like right now the Suns will probably end up, winning that series against the Clippers. And, kind of staying on the NBA topics, there's been a couple of NBA coaching hires. The Boston Celtics hired, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, Ima Udoka. I know that's probably wrong. And the Portland Trailblazers hired ESPN analyst and former NBA player Chauncey Billups. What are your kind of thoughts on both of those hires?
I really like the Celtics hire. I think he's going to do very well. I don't know a whole lot about him, but I do know that he is a very well-respected assistant and stuff like that. And I think that he is just going to be – I think he's going to carry on and continue what Brad Stevens was building there, because Brad Stevens was able to handpick this guy. He's going to be he's going to be his own coach, but Brad Stevens is going to still have a very big hand in what goes on the court still. I do fully believe that. I like the Chauncey Billups hire. I hope that it's not like the Van Gundy hire from last year, where he, hasn't coached and he's been out of basketball for so long and he's just been an analyst, and he comes in and he absolutely is terrible, because I like Chauncey Billups. So I hope he does well in Portland. The problem is, I don't know if Portland does not have Dame next year, Portland's going to stink. It doesn't matter. And Chauncey Billups there's going to be nothing he can do about that. So sadly, he signed up for this, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, he wasn't really given a great opportunity, especially if Dame leaves. But I like both the hires. I I'm a little more iffy on the Chauncey Billups hire. I like the hire, but I just hope it's not like the Van Gundy of last year with the Pelicans.
Yeah, the Udoka, him going to the Celtics. I'm a big Celtics fan, and I honestly did not hear, much about him, as
No.
some of those top guys like Chauncey Billups and D'Antoni and some of those guys. But the more I read him, I think, he's a very, well-respected coach around the league. He's been a great assistant for several years now, and I think he will have not success in Boston. The Billups, him going to Portland, that is interesting to me. Billups, to Portland. I don't think that's a bad hire though. But before he was hired, there was already rumors that CJ McCollum could be traded, and now there's rumors all of a sudden Damian Lillard could be traded as well. Because Chauncey Billups had something in 1997, I believe, some assault charge or something like that, and to me, that's the thing that really aggravates me is because throughout Chauncey Billups' playing career in the NBA, you did not hear about this, situation at all that happened 24 years ago. During his time at ESPN as an analyst, you did not hear about this situation at all. But as soon as Chauncey Billups is hired as the Blazers coach, that's when people, let's bring this up and try to bring him down when something good happens for him. And then all of a sudden, Damian Lillard, who's a top 10 player in the league, might want to be traded due to the situation that honestly I had no idea even happened until I was reading on it a couple of days ago. It's really, really crazy about this whole thing with Portland. This could end up really, really bad for Portland because you look at guys around the NBA who are most loyal to their teams. And to me, I would say Lillard's one of those top guys, most loyal guys on their team. And the fact that he possibly wants to be traded would just be absolutely insane. What are your kind of thoughts on Lillard possibly being traded?
Damian Lillard's one of my favorite players in the NBA. I love and respect the loyalty. I think a lot of people are going to say that he is kind of there's a word I'm looking for and it's not coming to me. But I respect Lillard. I understand why Lillard would want out. Lillard's been loyal for such a long time. Hypocrite. I think people might say that Lillard's a hypocrite if he leaves Portland. That was the word I was looking for. And I personally don't think he is. He's been loyal to Portland. He has given Portland his all. And I feel like the organization has failed him slightly. They haven't been able to provide him much better than CJ McCollum. Their best big man option that they decided to get him was Hassan Whiteside. And not that there's anything wrong with Hassan Whiteside, but Hassan Whiteside can't shoot. He's not a great scorer. So you didn't really bring him any scoring. Carmelo's a decent scorer. Carmelo's way past his prime though. The organization inevitably has failed him. And I think he deserves the opportunity to be out because it becomes a point where loyalty can be detrimental to maybe your own aspirations and goals. Because if he continues to be loyal, everybody in the world knows that there is absolutely, in my mind, zero chance he ever gets to the championship. I just saw a comment pop up, Lillard to the Knicks. I would love that. But what I'm hearing, and I think what a lot of people are hearing is Lillard, there is a chance that he ends up in New Orleans. New Orleans would package Brandon Ingram along with a couple first-round picks to get him. I think if you paired a player with the skill set of Lillard's with Zion Williamson and you have Steven Adams as your starting center, you still have the Lonzo Ball. I think that would, and you have Josh Hart coming off the bench. I feel like that is a team, as long as you hire the right coach this time around. I feel like if he lands in New Orleans, that could be not a legit threat, but they could be a pretty decent team in the Western Conference.
The thing about Lillard possibly going to the Pelicans, though, is I really don't see Lonzo Ball being on that team if Lillard's traded there. I feel like if Lillard's traded to New Orleans, I think Ball might be a part of that trade. And, it seems like every single time, there's a player or they might be traded, a team that automatically comes up is the Celtics, despite them, they had that trade a couple weeks ago, trading away Kemba Walker. They are not nearly as, as active in trades like people think they are. They don't make massive trades, like people talk about them doing. But I'd be really interested to see, if he goes to Boston. I don't think he will, but I mean, let's say you package in Marcus Smart, a couple big guys, and like 3 or 4 first-round picks, or something. If Portland is in a rebuild situation, if you trade Lillard, and let's say they trade C.J. McCollum, maybe Sam Presti from the Thunder trades a couple of their first-round picks and some other guys to maybe get Damian Lillard, and kind of has their rebuild and gets that 1 star in Oklahoma City.
Listen, I'm an OKC fan. OKC doesn't want to win. OKC don't want to do anything. They want to keep bringing in a player for one single season, like Kemba Walker, and flip them the next year for more picks. They're trying to build for way down the road, which I don't fully get, but I trust Sam Presti. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Lillard stays in Portland, or if he gets traded, where he maybe end up playing next season in the NBA. And there's actually another player, possibly being traded. There's been talks and rumors. It's Collin Sexton and the Cavs. I like the Cavs and I like the Celtics. So those are pretty much the only 2 NBA teams I'll watch. This makes absolutely no sense. Collin Sexton is the best player you've drafted, I would say, since Kyrie Irving. That was like 2010, 11, something like that. And it's not even close. Collin Sexton has improved his points per game each of the last 3 seasons. He's improved his field goal percentage each of the last 3 seasons. People talk about him, not passing the ball, which is true. If you watch at times, he does not pass the ball much. But his first 2 seasons, he averaged 3 assists per game. This past season, he averaged 4.5. I mean, he is improving in every single asset of the game, it seems like. Sexton, you cannot trade him. If you trade him, you are absolutely screwed. Darius Garland has showed some potential. Isaac Okoro was a rookie last season, but I'm much rather trading Garland than I am Sexton. Sexton is your future. I mean, he's your best player, and it's not even close. If you want to be in the playoffs this season, or the following year after that, Sexton has to be on your team. And, the Cavs did start off pretty good this past season. They went around, I think they were 10-10. They beat the Nets, I think, back-to-back games, which was just insane. And then after that, they just absolutely sucked. I think they were like 10-30 or something like that to finish the season. Like, horrific. But Sexton, he's your best player. He's your best player in forever. He has shown some, great plays. I think he's going to be one of the better point guards in the league in years to come. And if you trade him, to somebody, I don't know, like a point guard needy team, I would not be surprised at all. In a year or 2, he's going to be a top 5 point guard. I really think he's one of the more underrated point guards. The only issue with him, though, is he needs to pass the ball more. But like I said, he is starting to pass more. If the Cavs trade Sexton, their organization is already one of the worst in the NBA, and it's not even debatable. But this would even, help their case more, and definitely being one of the worst organizations in the NBA. It would be a horrible decision by Cleveland.
Yeah, I think it would be as well. I'm not sure if Collin Sexton is headed into his final year or not in his contract. But if he is, then I completely understand why they would look to be trading him, because I think they know they have probably 0% chance in re-signing him back to the Cavs, which is maybe why they're looking to trade him, maybe to get assets in return instead of letting him just walk, which I would get, because as the organization, sometimes you do have to look out for the best thing for the organization. And although it might not be best for the future, if you already know you can't retain the guy, why hold on to him for one more year if you know he's not going to return? I think that's probably why they're looking to trade him. Collin Sexton, I think he's a very good underrated guard. I think if he was on a different team, you probably would see the assist numbers go up. You probably would see a lot of other categories increase, especially if you paired him with a LeBron in LA, or if you paired him with, maybe, I don't know what he would be like with Luka. I don't think him and Luka would mesh well. But I think if you put him on one of those more top tier teams, I think you'd see a lot of his numbers improve. I like Collin Sexton a lot. He's a very talented player. I don't know where he would fit best just based on his skills, like what I've seen from him. But I know, I don't feel like he's going to remain in Cleveland, because I think it's more or less he probably is sick and tired of losing, which I get. Losing's not fun. But if he's also sick and tired of losing, being in Cleveland probably just also sucks because if Cleveland never drafts LeBron James, they would still be considered, and they are still considered probably one of the worst organizations in the NBA. But if they never draft LeBron James, no one would ever even care to talk about them, and who knows if they would even still be in Cleveland. I've thought about that quite a few times.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You make a great point there. And, Sexton has played 3 years. And honestly, I don't know with the NBA if they have like a 4-year and then a 5th-year option like the NFL or not, like in contracts for first-round picks. But so he has like a year or two left on his contract. And something with Cleveland, though, which I was talking about it on my last episode, and a team like Cleveland, a team like Detroit, teams like that, not top market teams and not good teams by any means, you're going to have to overpay players to stay on your roster, like insanely overpay them. Jared Allen's a free agent this season, and there's rumors that Cavs might re-sign him. But I was reading something the other day. Could be 4 years for $100 million, a max contract. I like Jared Allen. I think he's a good player. I do not think he's worth $25 million at all. The absolute max I'm paying him would be around 16 or 17, something like that. And like let's say you would sign him, not to mention you have Kevin Love, who easily has the worst contract in the NBA right now. I mean, he's so injury prone. He has a horrible contract. Nobody will trade with him at all. The only situation that I could kind of see, and I would not be totally upset about if Sexton were to be traded, which I don't even know how this would happen, is if they package Kevin Love in the Sexton deal. I think that's the only way, that's the only positive you can really get out of trading Sexton. But to me, if you trade Sexton, you're going to probably get a nice, good player. But if you trade Love as well, I mean, there's going to be a chance you're going to have to maybe give up some picks just to get rid of his contract. We saw that a couple of weeks ago with Boston. They gave up a first-round pick just to get rid of Kemba Walker's contract, which contract is absolutely ridiculous right now. But it's very interesting with Sexton. I would like to see him stay in Cleveland, but I don't know with his future contract, whatever it is, it's going to be, if he would stay in Cleveland, it's going to be absolutely massive because they're so desperate and they need a top guy, and he's the only top guy in my opinion who actually has a chance of possibly signing in Cleveland.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Kevin Love would ever. I don't think anybody would even take that deal strictly because everybody knows Kevin Love's contract is just so bad. I think the only way you see Kevin Love get out of Cleveland is a buyout happens. And I don't know if the organization would even want to do that.
Yeah, we saw that happen a couple of times, this past year or so, with the, I was mentioning the Pistons, they bought out Drummond and Blake Griffin. And, Drummond was another guy. It's, he was with the Cavs as well. And that was somebody, what I was really excited at the time when they traded for him because, his contract was, he did not have many years in his contract, and they might extend him. If you watch the games, he absolutely sucked. But if you're just looking at stats, because if you look around stat patterns, in the NBA, Drummond is absolutely one of the best in the NBA. You look at the stats, 14 rebounds, 12 points. That's good. You watch the games, half those rebounds are just on 2-foot shots that he misses by himself. Drummond, to me, we saw that buyout with Drummond. Who knows if we see it with Love? It's really interesting in Cleveland. They have the 3rd pick in the draft. Maybe they draft, a point guard to replace Sexton if he gets traded. It's very interesting. Hopefully Sexton, though, will end up staying in Cleveland. Kind of switching gears over to the NFL now. Speaking of trades, there's a couple players who might be traded on the trading block. Zach Ertz, some other guys. Allen Robinson. There's a chance maybe he would get traded. Nick Foles maybe. Who knows? So do you have any maybe NFL trade ideas or anything like that?
A couple players that I would probably look out for. I would probably say more or less Nick Foles is never going to get traded with his contract and the fact that he is virtually viewed across the NFL as a backup quarterback. The only way he would get on a different team is if he got cut and then signed for veteran minimum. I think Allen Robinson's name is always he's always thrown out there, but I don't think he's ever going to get moved. The Bears don't want to lose a receiver with that kind of caliber talent. Again, I think I think there's a couple teams that would like to bring in a couple guys, but I don't really have any trade ideas per se right now. Like there's maybe a couple teams that I would like to see get depth elsewhere, but I don't know if a trade would be necessarily the greatest way to do that right now. I think Aaron Rodgers, his situation, still the fact that it's still going on, it absolutely baffles my mind. I think they will get that resolved, and he will end up playing in Green Bay this year strictly because you don't want to lose out on $30 million, and then he'll be able to figure it out on his own. There's just no way Aaron Rodgers holds out. And then the other situation, which, I mean, half the time when you bring up his name, they kick you off the internet anyways, Deshaun Watson, that situation, I'm never going to get figured out. I have no idea what's going on. That has been all off season long. A lot of people saying that maybe he wants to go play in Denver, but how do you trade for him if you don't even know if he's going to be eligible to play this year in the NFL? So,
yeah, with Aaron Rodgers, to me, I personally do not see him being traded. I think he's going to play for the Packers. Hypothetical, situation though. The only team I see him being traded to is the Broncos. They have so many they have so much young talent. Definitely have one of the best young offenses in the NFL. If Drew Lock can get it figured out, I think the Broncos can be a really, really, really nice team. I had them as my surprise team, last season. And you mentioned Deshaun Watson. That's the same situation. I don't see him being traded because, he might not even play this year. It's crazy because, everything now, it's like we're not really talking about the Watson situation as much because, everything with Rodgers, everything like that. But with Watson, the only team I see him being traded to would be the Denver Broncos. But, let's say if those allegations were true, which, if that's true, I don't think it should play in the NFL again.
If they're true, I hope justice is served. If they are false, I hope it is just as loud.
100%. And that, I'm trying to think of his name, Sean Oakman, several years ago with Baylor, kind of a somewhat similar situation. It was a false rape accusation.
Yeah, and for him, though, he only had one. Deshaun has like 25.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. Like, the fact that there's 25 makes it a lot more interesting. And, I'm not going to, say he did it or not did it because we don't really know. But the fact that there's, 25 compared to one really does make it interesting. But, Oakman, he was going to be, a top pick in the draft. He goes to jail and, everything like that. Has his future taken away from him because, somebody lied. To me, if those accusations are false, the people who made those accusations should be in trouble just as much as, Watson, if those were true. But Watson is just it's very, very interesting with Deshaun Watson. And there's a couple of trade ideas I personally like. I really, really like Zach Ertz, the Buffalo Bills. I know they have Dawson Knox, but they just need more weapons for Josh Allen. I know the Indianapolis Colts make so much sense for Zach Ertz to pair him back with Carson Wentz and his, offense coordinator several years ago, the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But the Indianapolis Colts do not have the draft capital like the Bills do because, the Colts gave up quite a bit of draft capital to get Carson Wentz. But I see the Bills maybe getting Zach Ertz, get one more piece for Josh Allen, and then they can compete for the AFC, championship game or something like that. Another trade idea I like, I know you mentioned Nick Foles not being traded. The only team I see Nick Foles being traded to, I actually kind of like this trade. I know it might not happen, but I would like to see Nick Foles being traded to the Jets. The Jets do not have a single quarterback on their active roster who has played an NFL snap. Yeah, that's
a problem. That's a problem.
Zach Wilson, who I think has a chance to be really good in the NFL. If you're a young rookie quarterback, you have to. It's not a he should have one, he could have one. You need a veteran quarterback, to teach you the ways around the NFL. And why not have Nick Foles, who's one of the most well-respected quarterbacks around the league? He's ended up winning a Super Bowl. I really like to see Foles and with the New York Jets. I think it makes a lot of sense. Probably like a 6th or 7th round pick due to Foles' contract. But Foles with the Jets, to me, I think it's a possibility, and it maybe could end up happening.
Here's my issue with with like any veteran quarterback going to the Jets, like the thing about having a veteran quarterback when you have a young guy is they already would know the offense and they would know the scheme. But if you brought in a veteran quarterback right now, they're going to have to learn the scheme just like the rookie's going to have to learn the scheme. And while the rookie may struggle to learn the scheme strictly because this is like completely different to them, it's the NFL, it's a much different level of playing field. The veteran is going to have to learn it as well, and they might learn it quicker, but I don't see how it would fully benefit, them to bring in a veteran quarterback, especially Foles. Like I like Foles. I think Foles just everything fell perfectly into place for him in his career. Like it just all like happened. Like it was almost like he was just put in the right place at the right time all the time. And then like now he's just kind of like gets past where he should probably still not be playing. I don't love Nick Foles. I appreciated the run. I read his book, but I don't know if I thought because of their offensive coordinator, who is Matt LaFleur's little brother, Mike LaFleur, who they brought over from San Francisco. I thought maybe and they're running that style of offense. I thought maybe when Nick Mullins was on the open market, I thought they would go after Nick Mullins because he would already be familiar with the system. Nick Mullins is pretty decent. He could be a solid backup, but Nick Mullins ultimately ended up signing with the Philadelphia Eagles, which kind of left the Jets out there stranded. I don't even know if the Jets were really even expressed interest in Mullins, but I thought that was like maybe who they should have brought in because he would already been familiar with the system. So maybe look at bringing in a quarterback that's already familiar with that offensive system who could learn it like super quickly, bring him and get him familiar and then teach him. But I think honestly, because the Jets are going to want to play Zach Wilson right away, I think he's just going to have to be thrown under the fire and they're just going to have to stick with what they got unless like one of these guys hits the market. I don't think it's worth trading for one of them because inevitably one of them is going to hit the market at some point. Like I don't think the Bears are going to keep Foles. They're going to try to trade him. I don't think with his contract, the way it is, the money that is guaranteed still this season is like ridiculous for a backup quarterback. So I don't see why a team would. So I think when one of these guys hits the open market, like, I don't know, like Joe Flacco's still in the Eagles. He's probably, I don't know if they're going to keep him or if he's going to get cut because they just signed Nick Mullins. There's going to be a couple guys that will hit the market at some point and they'll get a chance to sign as a free agent. I think that's when they should bring one in. I don't think they should really make a move to trade for one. I like Zach Ertz to the Colts, though, because the Colts do need weapons. And, it would just make sense with Frank Wright and Carson Wentz and the huge connections. But, like, how much I know the Colts, like, don't want to give out too much because they still, like, while they do have quite a bit of cap room, they do have quite a few players that they need to break off and pay here at some point in Quentin Nelson, in Darius Leonard, and stuff like that. So they do have a couple of things to look at there. I don't know necessarily who their tight end is, but I think if the Colts brought in Zach Ertz, it would instantly improve their offense that I am already very, very high on.
Yeah, Mullins to the Jets, that would have made quite a bit of sense. But, with Flacco and Mullins both with Philadelphia, that's something else. Hurts has not played a ton of games. I like what Philadelphia's done by bringing in two veteran quarterbacks to kind of help and mentor Jalen Hurts. With, Zach Ertz, to me, the Colts and the Bills are easily the teams that make the most sense, in my opinion. I think the Colts make more sense, but I think it's probably more likely the Bills will actually trade for him. But, I mean, if Ertz goes to the Colts, I think they're Super Bowl contenders. I know that sounds a little bit crazy.
I already think they are without him. Like, I've been very high on him.
I think he's going to have, a great season. I think he's going to surprise a ton of people. They have a really nice defense. They have some really, underrated weapons on the offensive side of the ball. And to me, honestly, I think the Colts are going to win the AFC South and easily over the Titans. I think of, top teams in the AFC. I mean, I would put the Colts right up there, especially if they got Ertz. And that's the same thing with the Buffalo Bills, too. I mean, if they got Ertz, to me, they will easily be the top contender in the AFC East and one of the top teams in the AFC. Very interested to see, where some of these top guys go, but especially Zach Ertz, because whoever's getting him, he had a down year last year due to some injuries and inconsistent quarterback play. but he's still one of the top tight ends in the NFL. He's still top 5, and whoever gets him is going to have, a giant, great player, nice addition to the tight end position. So, one final topic here. You're unfortunately a Steelers fan, and the Steelers, actually cut David DeCastro. They saved some money there, and they signed Trey Turner. So, what were your thoughts on all these moves the Steelers are making, on the offensive line?
Well, it's kind of a new era slightly in Pittsburgh. Like, not necessarily a new era, but when you look at that offensive line, only one returning starter from last year, and that's Chuks Okafor. I like what they're doing this year. They signed Joe Haeg. Zach Banner's coming back from injury. They drafted Kendrick Green. They already have J.C. Hassenauer at center. They brought back B.J. Finney, who's already familiar with their offensive line and the system. I think, and Kevin Dotson last year had, if you just look at the numbers and you trust the scouting that PFF does, he had like one of the best seasons statistically for an offensive lineman as a guard in like a very long time. And he was a 4th-round pick last year. He was literally a rookie last year, and he had an awesome year. I think he's one of the more underrated like offensive linemen in the league, and I think this year he's going to start running over people. The signing Trey Turner told me one thing. The Pittsburgh Steelers plan on pounding the rock this year with Najee Harris. So fantasy-wise, draft Najee whenever you get the chance, because he's probably going to get, if I had to guess, 300 to 400 touches this season, strictly because they need to keep Ben's arm in good enough shape to compete. Because if Ben's arm's good by the end of the year, they can make a run in the playoffs with just how good that defense is. I think that offensive line, a lot of people think it's terrible now that they lost Marquise Pouncey, now that they lost Alejandro Villanueva, and now that they, lost David DeCastro, who is actually probably going to retire. Like that was one of the reasons they cut him. It saves them like $8 million on salary cap just to cut him. And I get that, he did great for our organization, but sometimes you have to do what's best for the organization, and it's a business still, so you still see that side of things. And that's what the Trey Turner signing told me. It's going to be a power team this year. They're going to go back to old Steelers football, running the rock. It's going to be very fun to watch, and I'm excited for it, honestly. I think the offensive line is going to be a lot better than people actually think they will be.
Yeah, DeCastro, him being cut, it really surprised me. And, surprised lots of people. It saved them $8 million, and like you mentioned, he's more than likely going to retire. They ended up signing Trey Turner. He's been through a Pro Bowl multiple times, with the Carolina Panthers. This past season, he had some injuries and was not nearly as productive in years past. There was talk the Bengals, wanted to get Trey Turner. Honestly, I was not really high on Trey Turner like other people were. I really prefer Larry Warford. He did not play last season. He opted out due to the coronavirus, but he's one of the more underrated guards, and in my opinion, definitely the best guard on the market. But, DeCastro, he's been one of the better guards in quite some time. You signed Turner. Obviously, Turner's a good player, but this isn't really an upgrade, and it's very difficult to get an upgrade over, a guy like David DeCastro. All the guys they've lost in the offensive line makes it really interesting. I like the point you mentioned. Najee Harris is going to get the ball quite a lot because, we saw Roethlisberger's, arm last season, where he threw so many times, last year towards the end of the season. That's where he really, tend to struggle some. This is just very interesting to me. I mean, you have basically a brand new offensive line with a brand new starting running back and Roethlisberger, this is probably going to be his last year. The Steelers' offense, to me, it's a big question mark, but their defense, I mean, there's no doubt about it. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL. The defense, I mean, you're going to get at least a top 10, season for their defense. But to me, the Steelers, it's a big question mark on offense. But if they can get their offense consistent, I could see them maybe as a potential playoff sleeper.
Yeah, I don't think the division is theirs to win. I think the division is right now, if you just wanted to take a look at the AFC North, because I know you're a Bengals fan, if you just took a look around the AFC North, I mean, let's be honest, I think we would both agree that Cleveland, it's probably their division to lose this year. And I think the Steelers have a pretty good chance of coming in and swooping that thing away from them. I think Baltimore does as well. I think your Bengals are maybe 1 or 2 years off from doing that, maybe 1 or 2 offensive linemen off away as well, which, I hope for your fanhood and for the safety of Joe Burrow's legs that they they start bringing in some offensive linemen, because last year he was hit. I felt like he took the snap and was running for his life on every single play. And back to my Steelers, though, I'll go bold here with a couple things I got to say. I think the offensive line will finish inside the top 7 by the end of the season. I think the defense will finish inside the top 5. And I think expect second-year outside linebacker Alex Highsmith to have double-digit sacks. Alex Highsmith was a guy that I was high on last year coming out of the draft. When the Steelers drafted him, there was not a chance that I could have been any happier. I said he could start. Honestly, he was one of the few outside linebackers in last year's draft that I knew that were going to fall out of the first round that could have started on day 1, in my opinion. He was pretty solid last year, stepping in for Bud Dupree when Bud Dupree was lost due to injury. I think he's going to do just fine this year, and I think he will have a very good season. Expect the Steelers to, I think, gain some respect from people after the poor showing they showed last year to end the season and just getting absolutely pummeled by everybody they played.
Yeah, you mentioned the Steelers' offensive line being better than the people think. That's kind of a similar situation, I think with the Bengals. By no means do I think the Bengals have a great offensive line, but I do think, some improvements they've made this past, offseason, I think it's a lot better than people think. I would still say it's probably about average.
Yeah.
But, you really look at the stats. Justin Herbert's offensive line at times last season was worse than Joe Burrow's.
Agreed.
And, and the fact that Herbert was still able to do all that is just absolutely insane. But you also mentioned Alex Highsmith. Before this podcast, I had a Bengals podcast for a little while, and I got to interview some draft prospects, not this past year, but the year before. And I actually got to, interview Alex Highsmith and stuff. And he was really, cool guy and stuff. And that he was somebody I really wanted the Bengals to get. And, of course, of all the teams to get him, it had to be the Steelers. And, yeah, I knew instantly once Highsmith went to the Steelers, he was going to have great success. I think he's going to be one of the more surprising players, not just in the AFC North, but in the NFL in general. And, with the Steelers, offensive line, them switching their offensive line, the Bengals kind of switching their offensive line. You mentioned the Browns. They are clearly the favorites. I don't even think it's close at all. I think Baltimore is not going to be nearly as good.
No, I think Baltimore's going to take a step back, I feel like.
I would be shocked if Baltimore had more than 12 wins. And I know people talked about, the wide receivers that help Lamar Jackson. You watch the Steelers play the Ravens, and I watch the, Ravens play the Bengals. If the Ravens are up, the only thing they're going to do is run the ball. When the Ravens are down, 75% of the time, the only thing they're going to do is run the ball. I don't think these wide receivers will help Jackson near as much as the people make it out to be. I think that they will help him, but nowhere near like Stephon Diggs has helped, Josh Allen this past season. Yeah, I would say the Browns definitely are the favorites right now. The Ravens will take a step back. I don't see the Steelers having that many wins as last season. I would say the Bengals, they're going to have more than 4 wins. If not, there has to be, Taylor has to go. But to me, I really think, despite the AFC North, despite knowing who's going to win the AFC North more than likely, I still think it's one of the more intriguing divisions going into the season.
Yeah, I agree, because the talent in the division is just off the charts. A lot of other divisions I just don't feel like have the talent. I don't feel like they have the depth that the AFC North has. I feel like the next division up would be the NFC West. I feel like that's probably the best division in football. And then I would probably go with the AFC North as a very close second, an underrated second, but they're not going to get the same respect the NFC West is, which is crazy to me. But I'm looking forward to this year for the Steelers. I'm looking forward to see what the Bengals do this year as well, honestly, because I like following the teams in the Steelers division as well, because I've enjoyed watching the rebuild that the Browns have done over the last 10 years to see that it's finally kind of turning the organization around. And I think the Bengals are pretty close to figuring it out as well. I do think that Zach Taylor will probably have to go before that happens, but because I don't think he's a very good head coach, but I think he'd be a solid offensive coordinator, but I've never liked him as a head coach. I don't know how you feel about Zach.
I pretty much feel the complete same way.
Okay.
I did not like the hire to begin with. The first season, there was an excuse most of the fans made. Oh, well, we were tanking. That's a bunch of BS. We were not tanking. We just sucked that bad. The second, this past season, even when Burrow was healthy, there was times we absolutely sucked. There was the Eagles game. I remember about 40 seconds to go. We didn't even try to win the game. We were content with a tie. Taylor, to me, he's an offensive minded coach, and he has shown some potential. But to me, there's times he reminds me of Marvin Lewis in the fact that he's not trying to win. He's just not trying to lose, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And, Taylor, I've said it from the beginning. I have a separate, Bengals page on Instagram. Taylor has to get 7 wins. 7 wins this season or he's fired. I would say 6, but with the extra game, 7 to me, because I do think maybe an upset win over the Steelers, maybe one over the Browns, because I know the Browns are really good, but the Bengals really had a chance to beat the Browns in either game last season. The Bengals have a chance to have a couple upset wins. To me, Taylor, if you don't get 7 wins, you're out. You hire Joe Brady as your head coach, and then you got Brady, Burrow, and Chase. And then, with Higgins and Boyd, that's going to be scary.
That would also, if the Bengals would ultimately fire Zach Taylor, that would honestly make the most sense because of everything they've done since bringing in Burrow has literally been just assembling his old teammates. Didn't they sign Thaddeus Moss, the tight end? He played for the Washington football team last year. Yeah, so they're literally just trying to assemble the LSU Bengals is what they're trying to do. So Joe Brady, if they do fire Zach Taylor, that would make the most sense for them.
One thing about Moss, though, is Bengal fans and some Bengal fans really overrate Thaddeus Moss, in my opinion.
I think everybody does.
Well, exactly. Thaddeus Moss is not nearly as good as anybody expects. Part of the reason the Bengals. Part of the reason why Burrow was actually sacked so much is because no wide receivers are open and they couldn't have separation. And then you sign Thaddeus Moss, who is so slow, cannot get separation at all. I don't even think it's a guarantee he actually ends up making the team. I think it'll be really interesting with Moss, with the Bengals, and just the AFC North as a whole. It is just so interesting. Like you mentioned, the NFC West is number 1. And I would say the AFC North is number 2. The AFC North is it's going to be so fun this year because, the Browns are probably going to win. But, the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Bengals, you don't for sure know how they're going to end up this season. And especially when we get an extra, game in the regular season, more football. That's more fun for me.
Yep.
I cannot wait for this, NFL season. So, this episode, we kind of talked about the NBA playoffs, some NBA coaching hires, Damian Lillard possibly being traded, Collin Sexton possibly being traded, some NFL trade ideas, and the Steelers, their offensive line, kind of talking about the AFC North. So, Jared, can you tell some of the listeners when to follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I'm on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at the Jared Barnes Show. Well, not at Jared Barnes Show. I'm on YouTube as well. Just search Jared Barnes Show. You can check out my podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. And starting in the month of July, actually, I plan on releasing 1 video a day on my YouTube channel, giving my expectations and my predictions for each NFL team. And that starts July 1st. We'll run the entire month, 1 video per day, one for every single team, which is a massive project that I have coming up. And it's going to be really fun, I think.
Yeah, make sure to go follow Jared. I put the links in the description below. That project sounds, really, really cool. I'll make sure to check that out. Make sure to follow me, the Sports 2 Hines Show, on Instagram and Twitter. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Sports 2 Hines Show.